Hi, I'm Randall. I grew up along the coast of Maine, and that's where my love of the ocean started. I sailed over 10,000 miles in my 20s, and after hanging up my Fowlies, I rediscovered my love of the bicycle. Both cycling and sailing connect me to nature and give me a sense of freedom and adventure. Now, I'm going to try to combine the two. I bought this old sailboat with the goal of sailing it to the Caribbean and then to Europe to do some epic sailing and exploring by bike. But first, I've got to refit and modernize this big old classic. Oh, and I'm on an insanely tight budget, so I'm going to do as much of the work as I can myself. And if I can do it, so can you. Special shout out and thank you to our newest Patreon supporters. Thanks so much for jumping on board. Your support helps keep this show chugging along, so thanks very much. If you've happened to catch my earlier episodes, you know that I've been making pretty good progress on some of my priority lists. The biggest ones were the ones that were critical: the stuffing box, the engine coolant that was leaking, and Walter Schultz and I are working on a fix for the propane locker to really make those nice and secure. In the process, I managed to rebed all of my chain plates and a few of the hatches and a chock block. I removed a bunch of wiring, the autopilot and the single sideband radio. I overhauled the engine room and traced and remounted wires and labeled everything. So much of what I've done feels very critical for me to feel confident about all the different systems on the boat. And now comes this time where I get to do some things that are a lot more electives. Those are the things that aren't going to stop me from going sailing. There are things that I've had in my brain since I bought the boat. The positive spin would be to say that I can work on parallel jobs and multitask, but in reality, I think I'm discovering that I have some ADHD when it comes to my boat projects. I don't know if any of you out there can relate to the same type of approach, but watching these videos back, I can really tell that I could use a little bit more effort on the follow-through. One of my tricks is to do tasks that are quick wins. Something that's been bothering me since I bought the boat is the condition of the external teak and the varnish. Once I unwrapped and splashed the boat, I could see the teak was already curling up and flaking off in certain spots. And after a year and a half out in the elements, it's only gotten worse, to the point where it's a little unsightly for me as the owner. I feel some shame. I feel that it's like having a really dirty front step outside your house. It's just not a great look. I just leave the teak naked, or I should make sure that the varnish looks good. I'd be curious to see how many of you out there think the varnish is worth all the effort. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tackle some of this flaking varnish and see if I can't take it back to its original nice looking teak. So I'm going to start at the back of the boat in the aft cockpit. The companionway door has been showing these really weird signs of flaking in these spots that collect water. I didn't have a lot of footage of it, so this is a freeze frame of an earlier shot, but you can see here and here the water is creeping up and under and lifting the varnish away from the teak. And I don't quite know why the water is doing that. Until one afternoon when I happened to be on the boat during a big rainstorm, and I picked up some really good insight. So basically the joinery of this door has a very small gap that is allowing water to go down the seam and then collect at the base of the panel, and then that's wicking up and under the varnish and also staining the wood. So I've got to shore up that seam, and I'm going to strip all the varnish off as well. The hatch for the companionway is not in great shape either, so I'm going to start there and work my way down. You can see that pretty much anywhere water is stationary, it's going to wick up and under and cause the varnish to flake off. Now, there's a couple different approaches to taking varnish off. I happen to like the approach that leaves the teak as much intact as possible. It's a little bit more labor, but basically you take a heat gun and apply it to a small section of the varnish, wait for some bubbles to appear, and then that's your green light to scrape it. If you look closely, you can see that there's actually water underneath that varnish that's starting to bubble. So there are other ways to get varnish off. One is to use a stripping agent. A stripping agent is something that you apply and leave roughly 24 hours to let it penetrate the surface, and then you come back and you should be able to scrape it relatively easily. I'm going to be trying this in a couple of interior spots where I need to have a little bit more control and I don't really want to create a lot of dust or varnish scrapings. For this use, I felt like this is a little bit more accurate than using a stripping agent. The other method is to just hit this with a sander and take the varnish off, but I've found that with sanding, you tend to take the varnish off and a layer of teak with it. And on an old boat like this, I really need to protect the teak as much as possible so that I don't have too much teak attrition. It's always great to have an expert right down the road that doesn't mind popping in and having a beer and providing some coaching.
I use my hand as kind of a brake, so I can't go
I might
past it.
even rebed this.
Oh yeah, I would take it off and then varnish it and put it back on.
This is my friend Rhett from Shannon Boat Company. He's been helping me out a ton and providing some coaching, guidance. He's been kind enough to pop in occasionally after he gets off work. It seems to happen more often when I'm stocked with beer. With the hatch cover done, I can now hit the door, which is not that small. Some of this varnish is really tenacious. Other parts will flake off just with a flick of a finger. This is a great shot to see exactly where the water is pooling and starting to damage the wood underneath. It feels great to have spotted that so that I can shore it up and stop it from doing damage. Oh yeah, this door has an inside part to it too. This was not a small job. The job to strip the door and the hatch was probably about 4 to 5 hours. Am I gonna suddenly develop a taste for unfinished teak? Nah, the varnish looks too good. All right, moving on to the tow rail. I'm gonna start at the back and work my way forward. This is a lot of linear feet of tow rail. Did you guys know that tow rails actually have 2 sides to them? So take that linear footage and double it. Ouch. Going back aft to where I started, you notice there's this pad eye that's screwed into the tow rail and it's got a shackle. If you guessed that that was for the running backstay, then you guessed right. Now, the running backstays are under a lot of tension when they're in their regular aft position. They're in that position when you're going upwind and the mizzen sail is in close hauled into the center line of the boat so they don't get in the way. But then when you go downwind, you pop them to their outboard location. That allows the mizzen sail to be let out so you can take advantage of the downwind direction. There won't be as much tension, but there still will be some, and there's going to be a lot of movement. So if you can imagine a cable shroud yanking at that pad eye and ripping it out of the teak, that's what's been happening. So changing how the backstay is fixed, even when it's unloaded going downwind, seems to make a lot of sense to me. Right after that pad eye is a stanchion mount that is through-bolted through the deck. Seems like it could be an opportunity to tap into. We're looking at the starboard side right now, and I removed the through bolt pretty easily just by taking off the nut underneath it, which is accessible in the bunk area. Cleaned it out and then put some Total Seal inside to prep it to make sure that it was going to be watertight. Doing the same thing on the other side, taking the bolt out, popping in the new one, putting in enough Total Seal to keep it watertight. Next step was pretty easy, a little bit hard to get to, but went down below on the bunks, grabbed the thread, put on a bolt, and then cranked down on the whole assembly. It's a little easier to see on the starboard side. There's the protruding bolt. And then I just got to thread the nut and get a ratchet on it and cinch it all down. Good. Satisfying. Sweaty. Sticky. But this is a much better solution. Love it, love it, love it. Got this eye. I'm going to hook in probably this guy That'll go right to the backstay. Backstay goes up to the mizzen. Boom, boom, boom. This big structure, double fiberglass, through bolted. This is what it was. So, big improvement. Feels like that's a win for me. I gotta give a special shout out to Rhett for that one because he said, hey, you've got this structure here. Why don't you tie into that somehow? He was thinking a D-ring or something like that. And just took a little digging around to find a fairly high load stainless eye bolt with a shoulder. So, but he was the one that sparked that location. So, gotta give props out to Rhett. Thanks, bud. With a really great weather window, I decided to go for another quick win. In anticipation of Dave from Edson coming out and helping me with the steering system, I thought now's a really good time to just throw down some new bilge paint and freshen up the steering area. I really like white bilge paint because it's going to show me any kind of sign of water stains or ingress. I think it's just a safer way to operate the boat so you can keep an eye on things. This job in total took about 2 hours or so. I ended up scraping and doing some wire brush to clean up the pre-existing state of affairs. I really like this Total Bilge, although you've got to make sure you wear a really good mask because it gives off pretty legit fumes. So I got a call from Dave one afternoon. Dave works at Edson Steering Systems, and we've been working together on my steering system. He asked if he could stop in, and he had a little surprise for me. We weren't really planning on replacing the quadrant, but if you can see here, mine has been repaired with some kind of braze-on treatment, and I think Dave felt a little bad for me, so he wanted to surprise me with a new quadrant, which is amazing. We decided just to pop it in place and make sure that it would work. I can hold that there if you want.
Yep, that is gonna fit perfectly. I'm gonna have to preload the bolts in just for clearance.
Yep. And then slide it down?
Yeah. Got the inch to spare.
Looks like we're gonna do an OnlyFans out of this.
Well, we can just send them to my channel then, because I'm well established.
Is that also 9/16?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm wondering if any of you eagle-eyed viewers out there, like Marty Sparger, can spot any issues. I will say it's a little bit easier to spot here on camera than it was in person, but there is an issue here. Yep. If you guess that those ears are interfering with the quadrant being able to go over to the full turn, you're right. That bulkhead is a little bit untraditional, so we're gonna have to modify that cap piece to trim down the ears so that there's no clearance issues when the helm is hard over on either side. We did take the pre-existing cap piece from the old quadrant to see if that would line up and do the trick, but the hole patterns were not even close. no good deed goes unpunished, so Dave's gonna have to go back to the shop and source a new cap piece to go with the quadrant. So he'll be back another day. But big thanks to Dave. It was a nice surprise. After Dave's pop-in visit, I got back to my scraping and sanding of the teak. Here I'm on the starboard cockpit seat, which has had some water intrusion. You can see the center line between the two panels have been compromised. Next up was the cockpit combing cap. So this piece goes all the way around the combing. And in some parts you'll see the boards that make up the cap have separated, and so I decided to use some flexible epoxy from TotalBoat. It's called Thixo, to inject into the crevices of the boards and seal it up to prevent any kind of rot. The proper way to do this is, of course, to take the whole cap off and recondition it, but that's a big job, and I thought the flexible epoxy is going to buy me about, I don't know, 3 or 5 more years before I really have to do a disassembly job. I'm hoping that I can make it look better, but I also did this hatch as well. So I got 3 hatches, cockpit combing cap, helmsman's seat, and then this nose piece up front. So it's a lot of epoxy today, a lot of Thixo. I'm pretty psyched about it though. I mean, it's flexible. It's gonna give me that water barrier that I need so that I don't get water intrusion and then more spreading and more damage. So it's not the ideal perfect long-term solution, but for me, it's like, I'm not prepared to take all the wood off the boat and refinish it. So I think this is like a nice, happy in-between, and I could do it basically in an afternoon. The wood is looking amazing. I just can't get enough of the wood. The only downside is that I'm under a berry tree, and these berries kind of fall. Today was physically hard, but also kind of satisfying and fun at the same time. So looking forward to checking it out once it cures tomorrow. Coming back the next day, everything's cured up, and so it's just ready to sand. It seems like every time I get teak back to its natural state, I'm always surprised at how great it looks. I've seen quite a few of you comment about what a pain in the neck it is, and I have to say that I find there's a certain zen quality to sanding and bringing back this teak back to life. I kind of like it. In sanding the helmsman's seat, I discovered a little bit of a detour, which is that some of the wood had come apart and needed to be repaired. So I cracked out the TotalBoat Thixo again and grabbed some clamps. I figured I'd shore that up and seal it up before I put any varnish or sealant on it. I mean, that's a pretty big joint, but it gives me that protection of water getting in there and bloating it and, you know, splitting it open. So, oh, I can see I forgot a couple. Same goes here, back here. Nicely solidified. The whole point of this is to prevent water from getting inside those joints and expanding, and over time that'll crack it out. So yeah, really like it. Really like the fact that it's flexible and it's going to be impervious. And back to more sanding. So everything's cured up and ready to sand down all the way. In total, I probably logged about 12 hours of sanding. I had to spread that over a few days because I needed to wait for the epoxy to cure. So all this work, the scraping, the sanding, the repair with flexible epoxy, is all leading up to try to create a really beautiful finish. But I mentioned a little bit earlier that I'm in a really dirty spot, meaning I'm under a bunch of trees. There's a lot of debris constantly falling. I clean it almost every day. And I know that if I start to put the varnish down, I'm gonna end up with leaves stuck in my varnish. So my strategy is to use a wood sealer, put 2 coats of wood sealer down, and then tackle the varnish project once I'm in a clean area. That way I lock in the color of the wood, everything is protected and finished, and all that it needs is my 7 or 8 layers of varnish. So far so good. Really love that honey warm color. Even though it's just sealer, it makes me excited for the varnish. And here comes the part that I really like. We've got some hatches, the cockpit combing cap, the cockpit seat, the helmsman's seat. It's all looking really nice, very warm, very inviting. I can only imagine once I get 7 or 8 layers of varnish on there, how much it's gonna shine and protect that wood. The nose piece came out really well with the thick sew. One of the triumphs of this whole repair process was fixing this rear door. I actually did put some penetrating epoxy up in those seams and 2 coats of sealant, and looks almost as good as new to me. And that does it for this episode. If you're curious about some of the products I used in this video, there are links below in the description. And if you're in the market for any of the TotalBoat products, you can use the coupon code here to get 5% off your order. And of course, thanks so much to our Patreon supporters. Without your support, this really wouldn't be possible, so I really appreciate it. You guys are the best.